All right, next we're going to look at some tools for preparing an expository Bible study. We're just going to briefly touch on a couple. One is different Bible translations. So often we can just be reading in our own preferred translation, and we can forget that those that are studying might also be using a different translation. But also, this can be really helpful for us in identifying key words, identifying just different idioms that might be in the text. Reading a different translation of the Bible or a few different translations can be really helpful for that. Another thing is commentaries and teachers. Really, that's what commentaries are other Bible teachers. And Ephesians 4:11 through 14 touches on this. I'm going to open up this passage in an app called Logos. This is a free Bible software that you can use on your computer or on your tablet or on your phone. I'm using the computer version, but you can do the same thing in a phone version. So I'm going to open up Ephesians 4:11 through 14 to illustrate my point here. So going to Bibles, Ephesians 4:11. Ephesians 4:11 says through 14, and he gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the shepherds, and teachers to equip the saints for the work of ministry, for building up the body of Christ, until we all attain to the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, to mature manhood, to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ, so that we may no longer be children, tossed to and fro by the waves, and carried about by every wind of doctrine, by human cunning, by craftiness and deceitful schemes. So the reason I highlight that is realizing that commentaries and teachers fall into this category of shepherds and teachers, or shepherd teachers. That's really the majority of commentaries are written by, the good ones are written by pastors and those that are equipping and helping pastors. And it's functionally an extension of their shepherding. So it's important to realize, one, we need to primarily be under the shepherding of those in the local church, but also that commentaries are, as they're doing that Bible teaching function, they're existing to equip the saints for the work of ministry. So we need to be teachable. So commentaries and teachers are helpful for that, having a good study Bible. And then there are different types of commentaries. There are technical commentaries that are focused on the specific words and kind of what's going on with the grammar. There are devotional or applicational commentaries that are primarily focused on either just specific meditations that the author has that they want to highlight, or some specific applications that flow from those texts. And then there are what are called homiletical or expositional commentaries, which are really just sermons. So these are different types of commentaries that you might use in your studies, and there's places you can find those online, as well as just looking at your own church's database of sermons and using that as a tool when you go to study passages. The next, which I already showcased, is Logos, but I wanted to show just a couple things that are really handy. One is the notes feature. So the notes feature is something that I highly, highly recommend people that teach the Bible to make use of. Anytime you do a Bible study, anytime you teach a lesson, throw it into a note in Logos, and then it'll be searchable in the future. Even years down the road, when you might be preparing on a similar passage or a different passage, anything tagged to that location, to that passage in your Bible, will show up in the future. I'll just show briefly what that looks like. So say, for example, I want to take a note on Ephesians 4:11 through 14. And I go down here to this little note icon and type note, new note. I'm going to just collapse this down so that this is full screen. So this is saying that it's highlighted in my ESV. Maybe I want to add an anchor there. I would want to add an anchor that would be to the referenced Ephesians 4:11 through 14. And then hit done. And then say my name, date, and content of Devo, or something like that. Or maybe I copy and paste points 1 through 10 of my expository Bible study notes right into this notes tool. Now, as I'm going through and doing all of that research and all that note preparation, all of that could be right here. So I can save that, I can close that out, and exit out of that here. And now if I go through, I have to have my notes and highlights shown in my Bible. But if I have notes and highlights shown, there's going to be a little note, sticky note that shows up. And if I click on that, it's going to be my notes. It's going to be my notes on that passage. And now anywhere I bump into Ephesians 4:11 in future reading in other Bibles, I'm going to see Ephesians 4:11 through 14 pop up, and I'm going to see my note right there. Another thing, I talked about it a moment ago with different translations, comparing different Bible translations, but that's something you can do within Logos. There's a tool right here called text comparison, and that I have it set to compare the ESV, the Lexham English Bible, and the CSB. So with Ephesians 4:11, I can see, if I zoom in on this here, he gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the shepherds, and teachers. That's what the ESV says, of course. But then the Lexham English Bible says, and he himself, so there's that intensive he added in, gave some as, etc., etc. So a little bit of variation there. And then the CSB includes the phrase some pastors and teachers, whereas this one says the shepherds and teachers. So all those text comparison tools would help me understand, oh, okay, there's some specific wording differences here. So shepherd and pastors, maybe that's same translation or different translation of the same word. Of course, it is. So that's one tool. The text comparison tool is a tool available for free. The notes feature, we just touched on that, and then commentaries. So there are also a few commentaries in Logos, two that I want to highlight, specifically the JFB, Jameson, Fawcett, and Brown commentary, and also the Faith Life Study Bible that are available in the free version of Logos right now. So if you're in Logos and you go to your passage or opening up a Bible, there's a tool called the Passage Guide. If you open up the Passage Guide and do a search for whatever your range is, so say I'm looking at Ephesians 4:11 through 14, I can search that, and then it's going to pop up. First, it's going to pop up with any of my content. So any notes that are related to that is going to pop up there, but then also commentaries are going to show up there. So where I have here Jameson, Fawcett, and Brown, Faith Life Study Bible, and then there's another one, Word Studies in the New Testament. But if I open up the Faith Life Study Bible, for example, I can see, move this over to a new panel. Filtering there is not helpful. If I zoom in, this is going to just be a study Bible. It'll parallel the passage that I'm in. So I could see just some comments there. Paul's description here of a particular role, offices in the church, resembles a description here in 1 Corinthians. So I could go check out that list there. And then it goes through and lists, all right, what are apostles? It refers to those who are sent out by Christ to speak and act with special authority. And then, okay, what about pastors? Well, that was one of the things we saw in that text comparison tool, right? Pastors refers to those who care for or protect the church. Since the Greek word used here is poimen, literally means shepherd, and is often translated as such. This role corresponds with the New Testament portrayal of the church as God's flock. So just some things I can see quickly from the Faith Life Study Bible. It's a very concise, helpful study Bible. As always, we wouldn't agree with everything in any study Bible or any commentary, but that's a good one to go to. And that one's just going to be pretty brief. I mean, you look at verse 12, there's only 2 comments there. Some of them aren't even necessarily commented on at all, so it's going to be pretty concise. The other one to look at would be the Jameson, Fawcett, and Brown. This is an older one, but it's much more in-depth. So if you look here, like starting in verse 11, this whole comment is just on verse 11. So lots to look into there with Jameson, Fawcett, and Brown. And then there's just quite a bit more in detail there. There's going to be a little bit of Old English to have to work around a little bit and try to understand what's going on there. But this one's going to get into the language a little bit more and help you understand the Greek and the Hebrew behind whatever passage you're in. So between these 2 study Bibles, you'll probably be able to get a lot of your questions answered as you start to get into that step 7, looking into commentaries and doing that investigation and research. So those are just a couple tools I wanted to highlight for step 7 that are in Logos. And then a couple other things I wanted to show were some free online resources. So one is the John MacArthur Bible Introductions. Many of you are familiar with perhaps the John MacArthur Study Bible, phenomenal resource, not free, but the intro sections for each of the books are. And this is a phenomenal place if you're less familiar with a book or starting a study of a book to jump into these commentaries. So I'm going to open that up in Safari, and it takes you to Blue Letter Bible. That's where this information is housed. There's a little information on John MacArthur. And then you can go and see Bible introductions for all of these different books. So if I was doing a study of Ephesians, for example, I could go into there and I could see much more in depth. So some title, some author and date, background and settings, all of this is going to help you understand your passage better. Historical and theological themes, what's some of the big picture, what's going on in this book, how's it broken down, where are there interpretive challenges, what are their sources of challenge that have challenged theologians for centuries, and then what's an outline. This is a tremendously helpful resource to just be able to quickly see, all right, what is the overall outline of this passage or this book. And this is helpful for you as you're in a specific place, something through what's going on with the specific passage I'm in. How does this fit into the big literary context? So as you think about that second step 2 in the expository study Bible or Bible study method, you then think through, all right, what's going on literarily? What's surrounding this context-wise? So that's going to be a really helpful first place to go, especially if you're starting a study. So that's the first one, John MacArthur Bible Introductions on Blue Letter Bible. Next couple are some commentaries. One, Calvin's commentaries. Whether or not you agree with his distinct theology and the movement that's come to be associated with him, a lot of his commentaries, because it's fresh coming out of the Reformation, is very exegetically driven. It's very focused on what does this verse mean? What does this verse mean? And it just goes point for point. So if I go into this is housed on Bible Hub. If I go into there, I can see chapter by chapter. I can go to Ephesians 4, and he includes the text itself in Latin first, and then he gets into some commentary. So I could go down to Ephesians 4 and get into verse 11 and see his specific comments on Ephesians 4:11 by just scrolling through there. So it's going to be very in-depth, a lot to think through there, but a helpful place to go if you have questions. Another similar in some ways, but very different, Matthew Poole's commentaries. That's also going to be a pretty intense, extensive look into some specific passages. So there's going to be a lot of information there that you can get from Matthew Poole's commentaries. And then two other tools, Desiring God's Resources. That is a website associated with John Piper. And that's going to be just basically all of their online articles and resources tagged by book and by chapter. So if I go scroll down to Ephesians, some of these are going to be sermons, some of these are going to be screencasts. I could go into Ephesians chapter 4 and see some articles, some sermons, screencasts by John Piper, all of those things that might help me in my study. And then lastly, there's the Grace to You archives, which is where you'd get the sermons from John MacArthur. And this is great if you don't have a study Bible, because you can just use the transcripts of their sermons, basically, of either John MacArthur's sermons or others. And usually those are going to be really in-depth and verse by verse, which is helpful. So if I go into Ephesians 4, it's going to narrow that down into some articles and some Q&As and just a variety of different resources all tagged around that passage. So again, those are just some free online resources, great places to start, especially for that step 7, for those questions that you've done your own study of the text, and now it's time to start looking at some of those resources and tools. What's out there for free? What's the right place to start looking? I'd recommend first checking those Bible translations and then going to some trusted commentaries and teachers. And of course, if you want to start buying some commentaries and resources, that's a recommendation list that you'd want to get either directly from your pastor or Bible study leader, someone that you know and can observe their life, and they're recommending resources that are biblically rich and going to be good for your soul. So I highly recommend having a few good tools available But again, these are things that you turn to after you've done your own study in the text, and then you're going to these things with questions. So, thank you.